So we are ready for our next session. How are the morning sessions? All good? So we are in for a true treat this morning. We have two women who are going to come to the WICERS stage who just are doing really disruptive things in their space. And they are kind of visionary. And, you know, they really are the WICERS story. And so I'm not going to do a whole lot of talking because they can tell their story much better than I can. But I'm delighted to bring to the stage my dear friend, longtime friend. It's funny how you know people for a long time, and I didn't even know what she was doing. But I was amazed when I heard her story, and I knew she needed to be here. So it's my pleasure to bring up Ms. Bronwyn Morgan.
Thank you so much, lady.
Thank you, darling.
Atlanta's a big city, but a small city at the same time. Well, good morning, everyone. Looks like you've been having an amazing couple of days. I know. I got lunch after this, right? I'm gonna take you on a little journey into the world of drones. How many of you guys are familiar with drones? How many of you are using drones? How many of you have kids are using drones? You're flying them personally? Your business is using them? All right. Let me tell you a little bit about me. I'm Bronwyn. I'm an entrepreneur, an innovation consultant, futurist, also a drone pilot, and also a meditation coach. So I do a lot of stuff. So today I want to tell you about my life 400 feet above. And this will make sense to you in a minute. You want to follow me on social media, please do. Twitter, we're Xeo and Airversity 107. I'm representing two of my companies today. And then also Instagram at XeoAir and Airversity 107. And I like to use the hashtag this morning of 400 feet above WICERS, okay? So let me tell you how all this happened for me, this 400 feet above ground level. When I was a little girl, I wanted to be a fighter pilot. I then learned that women couldn't fly fighters because it was considered frontline and couldn't do that. So I'm telling my age a little bit. Then I said, well, I'm going to go get a degree in aerospace engineering and I'll work at JPL and I'll become an astronaut. Well, needless to say, I didn't do those things. But I am still living 400 feet above ground level, which is a term that we use in the drone industry because that's the maximum height that we can fly based on FAA regulations. But let me tell you what I've been doing since then. So I went and worked at P&G and Coca-Cola, which is about as far away from aerospace engineering and being an astronaut as you can well imagine. I did that for about 20 years. My work took me to Colombia, France, the UK, and China, and many other places. I've worked in Silicon Valley. I'm on the entrepreneurship journey. I've been doing this since 2004 in various formats. I've worked in the entertainment industry. And before I started my two companies, XeoAir and Airversity, I started Subculture Innovation. Because even at Procter & Gamble and Coca-Cola, I wound up spending a lot of time out in Silicon Valley vetting new technologies and how the company could use them. So I got a chance to work with organizations that are now household names, and at the time, they were just small companies. And I worked in Silicon Valley as recent as 2 years ago, working with a company in the sensor space in advanced physics. It's a very magical place to be, but I kind of have this tech bug and this entrepreneurship bug. So my life is about innovation and now aviation. And as you saw before, when I'm not doing those things, I'm doing meditation. I also teach under my own brand called Bliss in Me Meditation. Because as Jewel said earlier, and I've known Jewel for years, your mental health, and many of you know this as entrepreneurs, you will go crazy as an entrepreneur. I wake up some days, and my mother especially, she's such a great person, she's just like, you want to give up all of that to go do drones? Why are you doing this? And then I'm like, you know, I tell her what a good idea it is, and I walk away, and I'm like, why am I doing this? But I love it. So when I'm not doing this stuff, I'm pretty busy around the Atlanta ecosystem. I've been on the boards for TEDx. I was one of the women finalists for Women in Technology founding member for World Water Relief. I'm on the board for Startup Atlanta. I started Black Women in STEAM. So I'm doing something to give back and to be a part of this great ecosystem that we have here as we're developing entrepreneurs and making a difference in our community. So 400 feet above, let's get back to that. So now, despite not actually making it to the space shuttle, although a friend of mine did, I am now the founder of XeoAir and Airversity. I'm going to take you through the journey of what those are. And before I do that, I want to acknowledge two members on my team, and I'm glad they're here today. Stacy Clark, who's the Director of Operations and Business Development for Airversity, Dr. Stacy Clark, and also Callie Bradford, who's our Vice President of Business Development for XeoAir. So why this? Well, we all know that the fourth industrial revolution is here. It's happening and it's now. In the next 10 years, roughly 25 to 30% of all jobs in the US, especially blue-collar jobs, will be disrupted through automation. And white-collar jobs too. A lot of folks in white-collar roles think they're safe and they're not. Artificial intelligence is moving at a pace that is unbelievable. And once this is fully unleashed, the changes in our workforce will be dramatic. And one of the most important things that we can do right now is to gain new skills. And I don't care if you're a teen, I don't care if you're in your early 20s, I don't care if you're just getting out of college, I don't care if you never went to college, I don't care if you're a seasoned professional. Getting new skills somewhere in tech enablement or technology is critical for survival. So, why drones? Well, I've always loved aviation and aerospace, but I also recognize that there's a great need right now for geospatial data. So basically data from the sky, and it's extremely relevant, and we're using it in so many different forms and formats now. Also, I'm helping to build the workforce of the future and building an aerial movement of drone pilots and drone professionals. Aviation and aerospace is one of the critical elements of the future of infrastructure for our country and for the world. So this is kind of a nice sweet spot to be in. And with unmanned aerial vehicles, there's an entire transformation going on, from urban air mobility or flying vehicles to now, if you probably saw yesterday, the FAA has approved Google's use of drones for delivery. They'll be doing so in Virginia, and then also expanding their test in Australia. So your Amazon deliveries will now come to your door. It's soon. It won't be rolled out broadly, but it's coming. So this is a very exciting space to be in. Why now? The market is incredible. This market is expected to be $127 billion over the next 5 years. 82 billion of that will be here in the United States, and over 100,000 jobs as it relates to commercial drones. So by 2025, the world will have changed. The world would have moved. And that book from years ago, Who Moved My Cheese? The cheese got picked up and thrown out the window, and you gotta go get the cheese. Very critical space to be in right now. And so when you look at the value of drones by industry, from infrastructure, agriculture, transportation, security, and media, entertainment, and insurance, it's growing. I'm sure you've seen some of the commercials for Allstate and State Farm where they are talking about using drones as a part of their insurance practice, actually using them for inspection of sites. My team flew a lot during the hurricanes along the coastline last fall, and the critical infrastructure that we were inspecting was, excuse me, amazing and unbelievable, and it's all real time. So this is a very exciting space to be in. Excuse me. Drone sales. By 2020, we're expected to have roughly 7 million drones sold in the United States. And by 2021, that number will reach 12 billion. Right now, there are 1.2 million drones registered with the FAA and over 130 drone pilots. We all fly under a federal certification called Part 107. So you have to study for the exam take the exam and you become certified. You got to know how to fly and then get your insurance, and then you can start working commercially. But you can also fly as a hobbyist, but there's very specific rules around doing that, because as you can well imagine, there are a lot of people taken to the sky and they don't know that, and they're creating a very significant hazard because every drone is considered an aircraft. So we have to have registration numbers just like you do on the back end of a tail of an aircraft. We just put ours inside because they're smaller vehicles. But this is very serious business, and it's no joke. And the fines imposed if you're not flying properly are pretty stiff. Right now, we've been hearing things like $20,000 fine if you're flying improperly and you're caught. Could also include potential jail time. Not to scare anybody, but these are some of the facts. And God forbid, you know, I always tell people who are not certified or who don't understand the rules, you do not want to be the person that flies a drone into an aircraft, whether it's a helicopter, a medical helicopter, police helicopter, commercial jet. You just don't want to be that person. That is just not going to be a good day for you and for the rest of your life. Let's talk about the construction industry. Drone adoption has increased by 239% over the last 6 years alone. $11 billion in job opportunities is expected just by 2020. And I also read another statistic that said that 70% of construction companies will be using drones fully by 2023. So it's right up here on us. And if you're not using them, we want to talk to you. Let's take a little look into the journey of construction and drones with a video by our friends at TrendFX. So you can see how handy drones are and what a difference it's going to make. The industry is evolving even before it gets started. I went to a meeting with several of my peers, and there aren't a whole lot of people that look like me in those meetings. Being an innovation consultant and always working about 10 years or 20 years ahead with trends with clients, I said to my peers, I said, well, you guys know we're going to be disrupted before we even get started. And they were all like, I can't believe she just said that. And I'm like, yeah, you need to be planning for 5 to 10 years down the road with your company. Because even though we're on the cutting edge of new technology, we're already being disrupted and we're just getting started. The industry is moving that fast. So we started with recreational drones. People just playing with remote helicopters and planes and quadcopters for hobby, and some people doing it for photography. We then are now moving to drones as a service, which is the space that we're in, where you're actually using drones in a commercial space to deploy against industries for hire. And then autonomy is next. So now, versus me behind the controller, It's just all programmed and the drones fly themselves. And so we're actually, I will say this, we're actually talking to a Silicon Valley-based company right now, and we're looking at a potential relationship. Well, I think we're not looking at it. I think we went on our first date. And we're looking at partnering up for this very issue. The biggest challenge with autonomous systems, it's enough with cars and other vehicles, but with drones, we have very short battery life. So right now, based on FAA rules, I can only fly my drone as far as I can see it. So it's called Beyond Visual Line of Sight, BVLOS. So I can't fly the drone farther than I can see it, because if not, then I don't know where it is, and it becomes a potential hazard, and then we got all kind of problems. Second problem is that 25 minutes of battery life isn't that long. So when I fly, I usually have 4 batteries with me, and you have a charger. I'm talking to a solar company now about travel solar panels that we can use. So that's a huge issue that we've got to overcome. And there are some new batteries currently in testing that will help us with longer flight times. But with Google Wing, what you just saw recently in the news, where they're now going to be flying autonomously and doing delivery, they've tested that aircraft. It's a blend of a helicopter and a drone, but on a very small scale. And so we're going to have to look at some alternative forms of power in the beginning until we actually improve batteries. And that's not just for drones, that's for everything. However, it's here. We're already seeing it. Package delivery, also in that same space I just talked about. And then flying cars. I'm doing an event tomorrow night where I'll be talking about urban air mobility. Was in a meeting recently with Uber Elevate. How many of you guys have heard of Uber Elevate? So imagine way back there, imagine your Uber now being a flying vehicle. So it lands, you get in with other people, and it flies you from here to Hartsville or Lenox or wherever you're going. They already use Uber helicopter as I hear some early adoption woes. I jump in a heartbeat. And we're going to talk in a minute about what our plans are for being involved in that space. But yeah, they're testing in Dallas, in Los Angeles, and a foreign city that they're just about to announce. And those tests are about to happen right now. So there's a lot of stuff going on. One of the biggest issues in that industry is infrastructure, because where are you going to land these things? You got to develop the rules, you got to develop the flight standards for how you train people. It's a blend of a helicopter, a drone, and a fixed-wing aircraft. Then once you land, how do you get from where I am to where I really want to go, because I can't land it on top of my house yet or in my front yard. So there's a lot of infrastructure. Plus, the FAA just doesn't go around and allow you to fly people around on an aircraft that's not tested well. So they've got a pretty big hurdle to prove to the FAA that this is flight worthy. So there's a lot in the middle, but it's testing, going live here very quickly. So a lot going on in this space. So let me tell you about one of my companies here, Airversity. We're a drone pilot training academy. And our goal is to teach people the Part 107 ground school so that you're prepared to then go take the FAA exam. We're opening flight training so we can teach people to fly better. We have live instructors. We not only teach publicly, we're also working on a private organizational training. So for organizations that bring all of their drone pilots in-house, we can train them and help them stay up to speed on their flight capabilities. A lot of utility companies, like Southern companies, they have an entire unit inside their aviation and aerospace unit within the company. Because when they're out inspecting line or there's an emergency, you need action then. You can't wait for the pilot to come and get it and then come back and bring you the data. You need to address those issues at the time. And then we're also working on some specialized classes for drone use and equipment and sensors. Because for us, it's not just the aircraft, which is what you see here. It's about this. So we're basically, at the end of the day, we're a data company. We just happen to get our data from the sky. And so we just do it with some really cool equipment. Drones, like this is a DJI Phantom. DJI is the largest manufacturer of drones in the world. They're based in China. They have roughly 80% of the consumer market and also of the commercial market. So right now, a drone this size, roughly is gonna cost you about $1,800, roughly. But by the time you get through adding on different sensors, and we'll talk about those in a minute, your cost and investment in this goes up a little bit, but well worth it. Second company is XeoAir. Oh, let me step back for one thing. With Airversity, we're operating in Atlanta, Augusta, Birmingham, Champaign, Illinois, my alma mater at the University of Illinois, Charlotte, woohoo, Chicago, Indianapolis, Savannah, and St. Louis. So we wanted to expand quickly to these markets, and right now we're working on building scale. XeoAir, the second company. This was the initial baby, and Airversity came second. Let me tell you about Airversity. We are solving two problems, one for pilots and then one for our clients. So we're a B2B company. And right now of those, if you remember that slide a couple of slides back where I said there were 130,000 FAA certified drone pilots, well, part of the challenge is there's inconsistent work for them. And I think people they thought, I'll go get my certification, I got my drone, now put me to work. And it's like, yeah, but you don't have any experience. So they've got to build up their capability. So they're flying smaller missions, things that don't have as much risk. But before, we put you out in a nuclear reactor or flying a dam that's about to break, or something that's a lot more sophisticated, you're going to need, more sophisticated equipment, and then also you're going to need more sophisticated skills. And that's where Airversity comes into play. See what I did there? And then for B2B, for our clients, it's about providing a very easy, professional assisted drone mission planning system. Because if you've never hired a drone company before, most people don't even know what to ask. They're like, well, can you come do this here? And I'm like, well, we need a little bit more than that. And people who need precise geospatial data, like, tell me these things. I need to know elevation issues. I need for you to fly this wind turbine because we've got some cracks. I need you to fly over this construction site. For some mining company, we need to understand how much volume that we've moved. They're used in search and rescue. Police departments are using them to find people. There's just so many uses for this particular capability. But for our clients who also want superior back-end analytics so they can make decisions fast, because we're able to do in a third of the time, at the third of a price, what it would take a helicopter to do, or a fixed-wing aircraft, and or an individual. So if you've got to hire a guy to climb a telecom, 1,500-foot telecom tower, which makes me nervous when I watch those videos on YouTube, it's going to take him a while, and there's a huge potential risk liability of his life, and it takes a while to go up and get it and come back. We can get the drones up and down, no time, get to the customer, make real-time decisions. And we can be on site, as needed when there is an incident. Our solution, drones as a service. So we provide that mission and geospatial data management platform for commercial industry. And it does all those things that I just said a second ago. We're also working with and creating some other capabilities that I'll talk about in a couple of slides that I think will set us apart. And we are a startup, so we are looking for funding. Our client value proposition, we want to make it easy for you. We handle getting you the pilot. You just come into the platform like Uber. Think of us as the Uber for the drone industry. Build your profile. We match the mission with the pilot. Our pilots are vetted, so we make sure that people are who they say they are. They've got the right skills and insurance, and they aren't on any list that they shouldn't be on. And then we provide a very easy user experience, and then the data for you. For our pilots, which is a big important part of the workforce, it's a consistent flow of work, and we're currently working on scaling our customers. So we're starting off, we're a small shop, and we don't have all of our complete functionality, but we have the vision for it. But a flow of income, also helping them build their experience base and their portfolio. So this becomes either a second job or for some people a first job and a career. We have a lot of retired military folks that have been reaching out who are, coming from flying, military drones, which we don't have anything to do with. But they're looking for a way to provide those skills in a civilian environment. And I'm like, get ready, we can use that. The industries we serve: construction, telecom, railroad, oil and gas, pipeline, refineries, government. There's so many different entities. I just sat with the folks at the National Geospatial Agency. They had a huge conference in St. Louis about 2 weeks ago. And it was a pretty serious deal. So their classified unit and their non-classified unit was there. And to hear how people are currently thinking about geospatial data and how important it's becoming is unbelievable. And it's growing and it's getting bigger. So the whole world is almost pretty much mapped, but we're getting close to almost 100% in terms of knowing any place in the world at a pin drop where something is. And even with our drones, even at 400 feet above ground level, with the resolutions that we can get with even the basic cameras, I can probably read what's on your phone from that level. If I wanted to, I don't want to do that. But those things are capable. And of course, satellites and other technologies that we are not using, nor do we want to use, can read all kinds of level of detail, a hangnail, if they wanted to. We also work with civil infrastructure, bridges, dams, and roadways, real estate, energy, insurance, disaster, entertainment, and media. And then we're working on autonomous missions and delivery so that at some point, when we move beyond the pilots behind the controller, we plan to put them in new roles where they're behind screens, they're checking our nest. So the drones are still flying, they're just flying on demand autonomously. What we do, we inspect things and we map them. So we can provide you with stills, which is RGB, red, green, blue, thermal, hyper, and multispectral, 4K video imagery, and LiDAR, which basically is light, used like sonar or radar, but we're using light frequency versus radio frequency or sound. And we can provide you that data as raw data, 3D, orthomosaic, so that you can see things, how they change over time, which is important in agriculture. And then also volumetrics, when you want to see how things have moved over time, like how much volume did we move. You can actually tell that aerially from 3D mapping and determining how much was there before. Elevations, it's amazing what we can do with the sensors. How we work, as I mentioned before, you create the profile, you build your mission, we clarify it, we relay pricing to you, the pilot is assigned, we fly it. Pilot interacts through our mobile app that we're building to let us know status, like I'm here, I can't get in, I fell, I can't get up, whatever the status is, we can keep the client notified, and then we provide the data to you. What makes us different? Right now, it's that we're small and we're a startup and we're nimble. And we have real-time customer service. One of our clients here, we fly for Airbus Aerial. Airbus Aerial is the new division of the company, actually based here in Atlanta, from big parent Airbus out of France. And we got some great kudos after working with them on some projects. And one of the things they said was, your customer service has been stellar, more than your competition. And I was like, yes. And I was the one primarily playing customer service. But I'm a stickler for it based on the way I've been trained in the companies I work for. So because we were flying in a real-time disaster, I wanted to make sure that our client was up to speed. So at 12 o'clock at night, he was getting texts to know what was happening because he had to relay that back to his client, in this instance, the government, because we had to know real time, was this a threat that could potentially, injure and endanger, millions of people. So my pilot was on it. We got sheriff escorts. My pilot almost got carjacked while on the mission. We went above and beyond. So where we're going, artificial intelligence, predictive analytics, and so many more, and I'm gonna share that with you. Let's talk quickly about construction use cases. I'm just gonna pick out two things. Safety, so for construction sites, we can increase safety on a construction site by 55%. It's massive when it comes to insurance, liability, and downtime, and reputation. And then also inspection. We can inspect structures at various elevations, watch over sites, see what's going on, and also provide aerial ground views of progress. A 75% time saving and cost in trying to do this any other way. I mean, that's massive when you want to stay on time on your project and stay on budget. That's a pretty big deal, how fast we can move. And there's so many others. We can provide security, land surveying, communications. We usually do land surveying with actual professional surveyors because that's an exact science. We just provide more of an aerial perspective that they mix in with their ground data. Where are we going with all this stuff? So, first of all, building this platform in and of itself is pretty disruptive, but we're going to be adding in predictive micro-weather analytics that will allow us to determine right at a pin drop what the weather is going to be. It's called micro-weather. So not just general weather, so it's going to be partly cloudy in Atlanta today, which would impact my flying. I can tell you right at this hotel what the weather will be right here, if this was my project. So if a client was booking a mission, we want to tell them, hey, you know what, if we could push this 2 days before, 2 days after, 4 hours before, 4 hours after, we can get this mission flown versus wasting time, wasting our pilot's time. Automated pilot background check. So it's just automatic. We can vet people instantly and determine if they're going to be a good fit for the company. Deep learning for predictive data analytics. So not only providing you with what you ask us to do, but if you so chose the package, we can tell you what's going to happen if you don't address this, not only this issue, but what we also see structurally down the road. So if we were flying an oil pipeline, and we notice, that there are some potential threats that are going to happen over the next 30 days, based on what we flew, we'd probably be able to tell you what's going to happen over the next 6 months if you don't address this. And that could save you millions of dollars in damage and everything else that goes along with that, the PR nightmare of an oil spill. So we're adding that capability in. We're adding in, we're adding in data management platform that's custom to us. This is where the funding will be, part of where the funding will be used. What's called low altitude authorization. Again, just FAA capabilities, and then also data visualization so that you're going to be able to see and the computer can respond to you around what your experience is with the data that you've asked us to fly. We're also looking at mixed reality, so not only are we going to give you that data, we're going to be able to show it to you real time so you can actually step in and actually see the dam breaking and what that would look like, or we can show you where the cracks are. So you could see it real time with the data that we've flown for you, but also show you the threat of what would happen if you don't. And then lastly, we're looking at natural language programming, which basically is like Siri, and she'll be able to, when you come into the platform, she just recognizes you and she just starts to talk to you if you so choose. And she can walk you through the entire relationship. And she's your customer service agent. She helps you with your mission. She helps you if you want to add on capabilities. And this is not just a chat bot. This is a fully automated AI system that is responding and thinking and getting to know you, getting to know your business, and providing you so that acute customer service that I mentioned, that was me, it'll be our system. And lastly, our team. There I am. See my gold wings? I finally got some gold wings. That's me up top. Our business development teams, our tech development, mission commander, which is someone we're actually looking to bring on board, marketing manager, and then also bringing on a data scientist and geospatial data manager. So as you can see, the drone industry is not just people who fly drones, but there's a lot of data behind what we do. And our advisors we've got former military folks that are working with us, aviation professionals, and other business professionals. Thank you all so much. I appreciate it.
All right, now it is my pleasure to bring up to the stage another woman to share her disruptive product company story with you as well. Please join me in welcoming Miss Akissi Stokes.
Am I? I'm pretty loud on my own, so good afternoon. Thank you to Daphne once again for having me out this afternoon. I'm going to take this. Is this okay if I just hold it like this? Can you hear me? And Bronwyn, thanks again. That was really exciting. So that's kind of hard to follow, so I will try. I am Akissi Stokes, founder and managing partner of WUNDERgrubs, and we are a locally based Atlanta company, food company that sells edible insects, bugs. That's right, that's what I said. I hear a little grumbling. And edible, not as in Colorado, but as in food for human consumption. So I do want to clarify that. Hello? Okay, great, thank you. So I'll share with you, and I'm sorry I don't have a deck slide today. It's been a really rough week. I am in IT, so I have a lot of deadlines. So excited to hear about the technology that's happening with the drones. Give you a little bit about my story and just kind of background and how we got started. In 2005, I'm sure everyone remembers Hurricane Katrina that flooded the city of New Orleans and kind of brought it to its knees. And then another 5 years later, in 2010, a magnitude 7.0 earthquake rocked the country of Haiti, bringing it to its knees as well. And so those events in particular struck me really hard because I had some personal friends and family that were affected by those catastrophic events. And so with that, I started thinking, what do these two events have in common? And there were three things that stood out in my mind. One was that they were unexpected and unplanned for. The next was that they left people immediately without access to basic human needs, in particular food and clean water. And working at the Carter Center on a clean water project, I understood the grave importance of that, of having access to that. And when you're on an island, it makes it even harder to get to. And when you're in New Orleans, the way it's structured, it made it even harder to get to. And the third thing was also no means to even grow your food or even natural resources left to grow your own food. And so with that, fast forward to 2015, and my silent partner and life partner, he and I were watching Anthony Bourdain, No Reservations in Haiti, an old episode, 2013. So this is 3 years after the earthquake. And Bourdain is sitting with a local chef in the food court in their courtyard. And he sees this woman with a soup kitchen, and she's really popular. She's got this long line, but he also sees people in the periphery of where they're sitting who look hungry. And he asked the chef, well, who are these people? And he's like, oh, these are people who were displaced from this catastrophic event, from the earthquake, 3 years prior, and have not been able to recover. So he said, you know what, I'm gonna buy out this soup kitchen, this soup stand, and I want her to serve these people. And so he does that, these people line up. At first it's calm, and then one man pushes a child, then a woman pushes a child, then a woman pushes a man, and chaos starts to break out. And he said, dumb American, I didn't have the foresight to see what would happen. And I had the right intent, but not understanding what it feels like to be displaced and hungry at that level. And so at that point was when my partner and I said, we started doing some research. What food could provide sustenance to people that required limited to no natural resources? And so we landed on the 2013 FAA report by UN looking at insects as food and feed. And then we wound a road a little bit more and found some case studies by some German professors, and we landed on this really crazy, wild idea. Yeah, bugs, insects. And I know some of you are thinking, what in the, but why? And so we thought, why not? When we started looking at the resiliency and versatility of insects, and in particular, we use darkling beetle, and it does matter, it makes a difference. We realized that they contained all 9 required amino acids. They required no direct water to grow. They required only 10% of the land to grow compared to traditional livestock. So for example, if I had a cow on a field grazing, I could grow the equivalency in protein in the corner of a closet. We also recognized that they were very high in protein and other nutrients, and they emitted absolutely no gas emissions. They also could eat through low resin plastics. And everything that they consumed, they converted into energy and protein. So we were sold. And so with that, we established WUNDERgrubs in 2016 with the help also of my in-kind team, my family and friends. We were the first, as far as I know, in Georgia and some of you are gonna say, of course, to be licensed by the Georgia Department of Agriculture to sell insects for human consumption. and in part wrote the first business plan. It took us 6 months, where it takes an average of 2 weeks. And that was simply because, and I won't call her name, we are now best friends. I said, Miss X, I'm going to be back here every Friday until I get my license. They didn't want to give it to us. And she said, we absolutely just don't know what the hell to do with you. Um, so when you talk about being a disruptor, there are those little nuances and little steps that you have to take. And when you talk about perseverance, and when you talk about persistence, and when you talk about passion, you are going to have to put in some long hours and some long nights, and you're going to get a lot of no's. And so, as you can tell, I'm sure I look like a very conventional person. No has never, when someone tells me no, I think, okay, I just need to go to a different person, or I need to take a different route, or what will get you to yes? So even asking that simple question, what can get us to yes? And she said, okay, I need a shared kitchen to pick you up, and no one's going to pick you up. And they didn't. So I went to this one shared kitchen in Decatur. She was the first actually to pioneer shared kitchens herself. And I simply went to her lobby and just sat there for 2 hours, no appointment. And she finally comes out and she says, are you that bug lady they keep talking about? And I'm like, yeah, I'm her. She said, we just had a UGA extension meeting about you, and we don't know what to do with you. And so she and I sat down and wrote out this manufacturing plan, took it back to Georgia Department of Agriculture, and they said, she let you in? And I said, yeah. And so with that, we got our license. And we set up shop. And this was in 2016. We did a number of incubators because we realized we were not just coming into a market, but an emerging market. So in a place where we're going to have to create demand or cultivate it. And so that started with educating people. So the theme throughout our business experience has been pivot, pivot, pivot. And so with that, when we established our company, we got into 2017 Essence Music Festival. And we sold out. We weren't prepared to take on such a fee, but we sold out, and we realized what the key was in converting people into adopters. And a large part of it was educating people on the health benefits, educating people on the sustainability benefits of them. So then, and yes, I do actually grow them. I ordered about 10,000 of them when I started out, just to kind of test out, do a lot of pilot tests, and testing with a lot of farmers, and testing with a lot of consumers. So we're currently a fellow of the Center for Civic Innovation. And so we pilot tested with about 10 farmers and educated them on how grubs could be used for a number of things. They could be used as compost to fertilize nitrogen back into the soil. They could also be used to compost for waste management, to get rid of, let's say, Arden Garden's pulp. They also could be used as feed for livestock. So those are 3 vertically aligned business models right there. With consumers, we went to different farmers markets, and so we manufacture a grub powder, and we put it in everyday foods. When we researched the food market, we realized when you look at overseas, you see the worm sitting on top of the cookie. That is not going to work with a Westerner. And it's definitely not going to work in the South. And, and I'll digress for a second. I did grow up on a farm in rural South. My grandfather was a sharecropper. It was during my early childhood, and he did get his 40 acres and a mule and then some. And so I got to see a model of, I know it's fashionable now to say farm to table, but that was just everyday life for us. We used the hog from the rooter to the tutor. And so learning from him and seeing how not only did he affect our family and having his own land and growing his own food and having that empowerment and the ability to do that, but also affecting the community and hiring people to work on the farm. And so creating a kind of contributing to the economic model. So circling back, and so with consumers, we realized we needed to make something that was not intimidating, something that was palatable, something that people would try. And so we started with a chocolate chip, what we call grub cookie. Looks like a regular cookie, tastes like a regular cookie. The only difference is this cookie, the base of it is vegan. So we went a step further because, again, we said we wanted something that took limited natural resources to make. So our cookie has 7 ingredients. It doesn't use water. And yes, it does taste good and it is moist. And so it also has the healthier aspect of having that extra protein in it, the grub. And so we are at a point where we want to scale up to become a farm. We realized there were other things you can do with it. So when you talk about technology and disrupting the market again, we want to integrate grub growth with IoT integration. And so actually yesterday we kicked off with the City of Atlanta. We were one of the recipients of the IoT Ag Tech Challenge. And so we will have a shipping container on the west side on the Beltline. And that will allow us to showcase to people how we grow them, how we harvest them, how we manufacture them. We'll also be doing some automation. Some of the type of things that we want to do are, for example, the grubs come in about a 4-stack. If you imagine a baker's rack, and they're 4 stacks, and they're in 4 stages. And so we want kids, as a STEAM extension program, kids to come in and help us in building sensors and automating those trays, measuring density of the grubs and figuring out when that IoT piece needs to kick off, and that little robot needs to say, okay, shift this shelf out, shake these eggs into the next tray, and then we check the density or heat of the next one. There's some things we want to do with energy, such as when the grubs, we are working with some Emory students who have figured out how to conserve heat from compost and transfer it into a battery to cultivate energy. And so we want to do the same thing with grubs. They move constantly. They have energy. And so we want to figure out, how do we transfer that into a volt? How do we transfer that into a battery? So those are the type of things that we want to do in container. We also, as I said, want to get into waste management. They can also eat through low resin plastics. So those are just some of the things that are in my head that we want to do. And we've got a couple other models. But one thing, when you talk about being a disruptor in an emerging market, in this particular market, in 2018 grossed about $400 million. There are about 6 or 7 other companies in the United States who are typically using crickets, and we landed on mealworms for a reason, because you can use every aspect of them. Their molting, their poop, or their frass you can use for fertilizer. And the market is expected to grow about 43% to over about $1.8 billion in 5 years. And so I went to this agriculture conference that looks at digitizing horticulture, if you will. And I looked around and I realized there was only one of me in a sea of people like yourself. And that's a problem. So when I'm looking at these companies who are getting seed for $120 million and building these huge facilities in Texas and other places, there's not a shift in the paradigm. So you're producing food a different way, but for the same markets, for the same people, and that's a problem. And so those are one of the gaps as a social impact or a social entrepreneurial company that we want to fill in. And so when we talk about that, earlier I talked about, looking at Haiti and looking at catastrophic events in other places. And as a fellow at CCI, we decided to look at local Atlanta. What did it look like? And it stemmed from someone saying to me, "Why are you selling bugs for people to eat? We're not a third world country." And that was expected, that response. And I thought to myself, are you sure? Have you been to certain pockets of just your own city? When you see how people are living and struggling to survive. And again, when I talk about that incident with Haiti, this was 3 years after the event that people were still displaced and living like that. So when we started looking at Metro Atlanta in particular, the data led us to about 20% of the population is in poverty and has been for 2 to 3 generations of that family. So we're talking about people who are surviving on less than $24,000 a year. And so with that, we started looking at what access do they have to food. And about a third of that 20% lived more than a mile away from a grocery store. So me and my partner were like, we want to test it. We got in our car, went to certain zip codes, and we drove 1 mile, we drove 2 miles, we drove 3 miles, we drove 4 miles, 5 miles, up to 10 miles before we hit a grocery store with fresh food. And so then I started researching, okay, why aren't these grocery stores here? And so those grocery stores aren't there because the model is it takes about 10 years for a grocery store to make a profit. That means that, and I used to be a business analyst, and so that means that you're gonna need to have a certain infrastructure of income and other things in place to support that. If you're a 24,000 or less neighborhood, not gonna happen. So I'm never going to put a grocery store there. It just from a business perspective does not make sense. So our company is just one of the ways to supplement, not replace, but supplement not only food for people and making it every day. So we do things like little rice balls and things like that, things that are palatable for people. But also, if you don't want to eat it, you can grow it. And again, we're talking about a $1.8 billion market globally within 5 years. And although Westerners are catching up, 80% of the world taps into insects as protein. So showing people what those business models look like or what we're about. And so also to kind of finish out our study, we then went adversely to different zip codes on a different side of town and tracked how many grocery stores did I hit within a 10-mile radius. We didn't have to go more than a mile, and we hit 5. So that's a huge disparity. And so again, we fought to have our container on the west side for a reason, because you need to make certain that everyone has access or exposure to different types of technology and different types of food and protein alternatives. So with that, and again, like I said, I didn't have time, my apologies, to do a deck. So with that, we are hoping to try to transform what an insect farmer looks like, but also help Georgia produce another type of crop. Currently, it's a low barrier, there's a low entry barrier into insect farming because it hasn't been regulated yet. People are working to do that. They're trying to figure out what the policies need to look like and forming organizations. So it's a perfect time to introduce students to it. It's a perfect time to introduce residents of Atlanta to it. Also, when you talk about STEAM education, some of the other things we want to do in showing children how to work with the sensors and automate it and how it's grown and harvested, we want to also do a distributed cooperative model, if you will. So we're reducing that supply chain. It's local, it's right here, you can access it. So that means it reduces the cost. A cost of beef on average is going to be about $6 to $7. We can produce the equivalency for less than $1. And we also want to kind of figure out how we can take profits from those things that we're selling out of this container and then funding some of these schools in their STEM programs. So I'll wrap up with this quote that I heard a speaker say one time that I thought was really interesting. And I'm going to switch it up and say a man was at home. A man was at home watching television one morning, watching a show, and all of a sudden a news flash comes on and they said, oh my gosh, there is this crazy person who has gotten off on 285 and they've gotten off on the wrong ramp and they're going the wrong way. And all of a sudden the man's telephone rings and it's his wife. And he was like, hey babe, be careful. There is some crazy person out here who is on the ramp going the wrong way. And she's like, I know, I'm on this ramp and everybody's going in the wrong direction. So when you talk about being a disruptor, you've got to be comfortable with being the first sometimes at something and kind of setting, blazing that trail. Also figuring out who to partner with and how to partner with people and how to share information. And kind of our last piece is trying to figure out how to gather data on what we're doing and providing that data for others. The more people who are in this market, the better it can become, the bigger it can grow. So once again, I'm Akissi Stokes, founder of WUNDERgrubs, and I thank you for your time.